repeat revenue is so critical when acquisition becomes expensive for two reasons. One is it just provides more profitability. And the second is it helps you justify higher acquisition costs on the front end if you can count on those customers to drive meaningful LTV.
Hey everyone, this is Nazar Akil from Max Pro.
Hi, I'm Linda.
And I'm Paul.
And we're 11 Pebbles.
Hi, this is Lopa Vandermersch from Rasa.
Oh, and you're listening.
And you are listening to the E-Comm Show.
Welcome to the E-Comm Show, presented by BlueTuskr, the #1 place to hear the inside scoop from other e-commerce experts, where they share their secrets on how they scaled their business and are now living the dream. Now, here is your host, Andrew Math.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the E-Comm Show. I'm your host, Andrew Math, and today I am joined by the amazing Drew Cook, who is the CFO and head of operations over at Pact. Drew, how you doing? You ready for a good show?
Good, Andrew. Excited to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, super excited to have you on the show. Love diving into everything that you've got going on. Obviously, touching sustainability. We'll get into that stuff too. But I like to do the usual and give you an opportunity to give everyone a little bit more information about your background, where you've been, where you're at now, and a little bit more about Pact.
Perfect. So I've been at Pact for about 9 years. Before that, I have what I would consider a pretty typical kind of finance training background. So I did investment banking in New York for a few years, and then worked for the Chicago Cubs, which was an interesting spin on finance, but did that for a couple years. And then I went to business school in Chicago. And between my 2 years, I interned with a small venture fund called Revelry Brands, who at the time was the majority owner of Pact. So got exposed to the Pact business at that point. Loved it, was kind of inspired by the mission and the team, and joined full-time after I graduated from business school. And so I've been here for 9 years, as I mentioned. My kind of role covers all the what I would consider supporting functions. So we're 90% direct to consumer. We've got a small wholesale business. And I view kind of my job, my team's job, as making life easier for our marketers and our product team to put great products on our website and hopefully sell them. So, and yeah, Pact has been around for a little bit longer than I've been here, so 12 or 13 years. We are, as I mentioned, 90% direct to consumer, about 85% women's products is what we sell. And our key point of differentiation in the market is sustainability. So everything that we make is certified organic, and almost everything we make comes out of a fair trade certified factory. So, Apparel is a pretty crowded marketplace, but we've got a few points of difference that help us stand out a little bit.
Yeah. So on the sustainability side, obviously everything's kind of labeled as, organic, and it, obviously it has all the different sustainability things that everyone likes to claim. And that's also a crowded market now as well, because everyone's kind of going in that direction. So what's your team doing to kind of stand out from all the other sustainable brands that are out there now?
Yeah, I think the big piece is that, for us, it's not a capsule. It's not one season that we're testing it out. It's comprehensive. And so when you come in to our website, you can be confident that everything that you're going to buy there or see there is made with the same values. And so, a lot of brands, big brands, small brands, will kind of test out sustainability to see how their consumers feel about it by doing a capsule. So they'll try, a collection of t-shirts that are organic. But we believe to make kind of long-lasting change in the industry, you have to commit to it a little bit more wholeheartedly. And so we've made a very strong bet that consumers care about where products come from and how they're made. And so it runs through every single product we make.
One thing I know I wanted to touch on, because it's super interesting. You're the CFO and the head of operations, which is usually two different roles, not usually two different things. So obviously you've got a massive background on the financial side. I believe you were at Merrill Lynch for a while. You mentioned you were with the Cubs. The operational side, so are you also overseeing like fulfillment, inventory, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, and I think specifically on the inventory piece, as an earlier stage business, working capital and kind of inventory management is so critical to cash management overall, and cash management is so critical to kind of earlier stage businesses that I think there's a very direct line there with how that works. But the more kind of tactical operational piece, fulfillment, I work hand in hand with our head of product on procurement and kind of working directly with our factories, inbound freight, outbound freight. That piece has been something that I've learned, but what my kind of view on it, having done it for 4 or 5 years now, is that an analytical mindset is well suited to handle those responsibilities. And I think the training I got in finance and kind of in my experience being the CFO made me a little bit better suited to kind of pick up the operations piece, even though I didn't have more specific, ops background or training.
That makes a lot of sense, and that is a very good point. But now at this point, and your company I know is far cleared 8 figures, so you're much bigger now. Handling all of that's got to be super fun. Are you on how many different channels are you on? Are you solely focused on the D2C site, or are you also available on other marketplaces or other websites?
So our online presence is almost exclusively limited to our website, which is wearpact.com. We have a very small Amazon presence, and Zappos puts some of the products we sell to them on Amazon. But then we also have the remaining, most of the 10% that's not via our own website comes from Whole Foods Market. So we have distribution in about 450 different Whole Foods across the country. They have what I would describe as a relatively curated assortment of our products. A lot of people don't even know that Whole Foods sells apparel, but we've got a pretty sizable business there that we actually think is bigger than anything we could ever build with any individual department store. So it's a great place for us to meet our consumer. They're very good partners for us, and the consumer walking through the Whole Foods door is one that immediately has at least some base alignment with our values.
Yeah, that seems like the two brands would be aligned pretty well.
Yeah.
The Amazon side's very interesting. I'm always excited to hear when someone is limiting how much they're doing on Amazon. What is the thought process behind why you have a limited selection on inventory on Amazon, and then why did you select that product line as well?
Yeah, so I think it's impossible to ignore Amazon overall. They are within kind of any kind of e-commerce. They are not only a huge checkout location, but it's also a research platform and a search engine. And so I think to not be on there risks the chance to kind of miss exposing your brand to certain consumers. And there are a million risks with Amazon. If you get over leveraged to them, they could always, go do the same thing via their private label. You don't own the customer interaction or the customer relationship. And so, we very clearly acknowledge kind of the risks. And the biggest one for us is probably being directly competitive with our own website. And so we try to limit the assortment. The way we do it is, if you're on Amazon, you're also not typically shopping for fashion items. I don't think it is the best kind of fashion buying experience. And so we put our kind of core basics on there, replenishable items that you can think of buying on Amazon. So our biggest product category right now is our women's shelf bra camisole. It is a basic layering piece. It accounts for like 75% of our sales on Amazon. And so we just have great scale there and, a long history of built up reviews. And so we try to make sure that what we're putting on there is very tight, that it's not going to detract from, what we think of as the higher value consumer relationships that'll come from a direct relationship.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And for Zappos, so obviously you're selling to Zappos, they're doing some on there. You don't have any control over that, correct? It's just Zappos just has it available.
Yeah, Zappos is also a very small assortment that we sell to them. And Zappos and Amazon are part of the same company, which is Amazon as a parent company. And so Zappos chooses to put a fair amount of their products onto the Amazon platform. And so some of our products that you'll see on Amazon, you'll know that they're actually sold by Zappos.
That's interesting. So are they overlapping with you at all, or is there something in there where
there's some overlap?
You're not available.
Yeah, no, there's some overlap with products we sell there and on our website. But we do try to keep it to most of our basics as well. And so, we're actually thinking a lot about that channel right now and what the best way to kind of to service both Zappos and Amazon is. But I think our continued belief is that you want core basics typically in different pack sizes than we're selling on our own website as well, so that you're differentiating that way. But where people are looking for, organic, if they're searching for organic underwear, they're searching for organic leggings, they can find our assortment there because we think we do it better than anybody else. And, we haven't spent a ton of money on brand awareness. And so being in that platform can ultimately help bring people into the brand.
Yeah. You mentioned you have been with the company for 9 years. You said they're about 12, 13 years old. So you were pretty much right at the beginning there. So obviously you've seen the company grow substantially since then. And you also got to go through the fun that was the whole COVID period. How did you deal with that, specifically with supply chain issues? And then what I would imagine was probably a pretty significant increase in sales traffic coming to the site. And is that still something that you're battling with, or have you kind of cleared through that?
Yeah, so COVID, as I think you've kind of nailed it, it was a double-edged sword where at the beginning of COVID, when we had already, bought products and we weren't waiting for them to come in, it felt amazing from a business standpoint because you've got all this demand. People are at home. They're buying online. And for us, they're buying comfort. And comfort is really what we focus on. And so our brand was very well suited to take advantage of that. The other kind of interesting aspect is that grocery stores were always deemed essential. And so our retail via Whole Foods never really shut down. So we were, people weren't going to Nordstrom's, but people were still going to Whole Foods or and other grocery stores. So that kind of helped insulate some of our wholesale business as well. And so super beneficial at the start. And then you start to see the impact on the supply chain, specifically what was happening overseas. So our factories shut down from anywhere between 30 to 60 days. At the same time, we're facing massive increase in demand. And so the follow-on effect of that is that at some point you start running low on inventory. And then compounding that was the port issues in LA. And so there were vessels that would sit outside the port of LA for 20 or 25 days. So we would think we're kind of on the verge of having new products, and then they'd be stuck kind of, just miles offshore. And so that was very challenging. Our warehouse managed things pretty well through COVID. So we didn't have huge issues there. But now it feels like things are normalizing a little bit. But, as the supply chain normalizes, then you start to see the softer consumer with some of the macro things that are happening right now in the economy. So it's always, our business has been pretty good, but it's hard. It feels like you never see, supply working perfectly smoothly and demand taking off at the same time. It seems to be one or the other.
Yeah. Where do you think this is going to end up going now? So obviously, we've kind of gotten out of the supply chain issues, but now we're having this issue where a lot of sellers, and correct me if I'm wrong if it's on your end as well, but a lot of sellers are seeing that sales are, some saying they're slumping. Others are saying yeah, well, that's because the past 2 or 3 years was kind of like gangbusters. So it's a little bit, is it actually slumping or is it correcting? But then obviously now we're, in this discussion of, are we in a recession or are we not? Are things going to get worse? Are they going to get better? How are you kind of mitigating that and being able to deal with what may or may not happen?
Yeah, first of all, I'm not an economist. I'm not that smart on this stuff. So I read and I try to understand how it's going to impact our business. And my gut is that if you tell the public and customers and consumers over and over and over that there's a recession happening, that they're going to start to believe it and act accordingly, even when employment's holding up okay. People aren't losing their jobs at a massive rate as they have in past recessions. And so, for us, I also think it's hard for us to pinpoint what's going on. Is it just a normalization from COVID peaks of demand that you were talking about? We're also just at a much higher scale. And so I think maintaining the same levels of growth we've seen the past few years isn't necessarily sustainable, but we're still going to grow 25, 30% this year. And so, that's, I think we're fortunate to be in that situation that, our business still has some tailwinds to it. But my hope is we can kind of navigate through as inflation eases. Consumers probably get a little bit more comfortable buying, and that we have somewhat of a soft landing here, and that we don't see some of the same recession impacts that we've seen historically. And I think one of the other hard things to put together is that the last recession that everybody's thinking about was the second biggest in the country's history. And so I think it's possible for us to be in a recession that's not quite as negative, and that people are waiting for the bottom to fall out, but we might have a little bit more of a muted recession where we can bounce back a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Are you doing anything now to potentially, just kind of reduce any risk that you may have? I know some people are really ramping up marketing because they want to just kind of fight through it. Others are going in the opposite direction where they're more focused on, efficiencies of fulfillment and inventory and just making sure they have what they need to kind of ride out whatever's going to happen. Like, what's your approach to that?
Yeah, I think part of it is trying to be cautious about the macro environment right now, but the other is understanding what's happened to, growth stage businesses over the past 2 years. And, there was a time where, if you were growing 40 or 50%, it didn't matter what your bottom line looked like. And that has very much changed, I think, in the market, and whether it's public investors or private equity investors. And so I think the incentives for a brand to pursue growth at all costs have gone away. And so for us, I think that's probably the bigger driver for us versus macro conditions, is that, we build sustainable products. We also need to have a financially sustainable business model. And we're profitable. We're not reliant on external capital right now to fund our operations. And so for us, I think that's been the biggest piece, is that we're slowing growth a little bit proactively, because that means we can grow more profitably and not necessarily risk that we're going to grow so fast that we need to fund operating losses to do so. And so I would say it's more of the kind of market conditions in some way that have dictated us slowing down growth a little bit and being a little bit more cautious about how we're spending, pace of new customer acquisition, and things like that.
Yeah. So as you kind of look into that, adjustment, you're obviously focusing on bottom line. What does the investment then go into? Are you looking to expand into new channels? Is the thought to expand inventory? I mean, from a marketing side, which is obviously a little bit more in my forte, like there's really only so much you can do from a digital perspective without just spending an arm and a leg for customer acquisition costs. There's only so many ad channels. Like, what does that approach look like to continue to scale it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really hard. So as you kind of continue investing in new customer acquisition, there are diminishing returns at some point. And so, and we're very big on measurement and data. And so if we can't see what a dollar is getting us in spend, it's hard for us to place that dollar. And so we've retrenched a little bit into very core marketing channels where we feel like we have strong attribution, the ability to kind of pull levers as we need to manage overall performance. And so as we think about investing in growth, we're looking at a number of things. One is continuing to try to ensure that we're providing existing customers with options to come back. And so repeat revenue is so critical when acquisition becomes expensive, for two reasons. One is it just provides more profitability. And the second is it helps you justify higher acquisition costs on the front end if you can count on those customers to drive meaningful LTV. And so focused a lot on providing great service, great products to our existing customers. We're also looking at new channels. And so, D2C was the hot thing for a while, but now everybody's looking more at omni-channel. And so where are the places that we can go efficiently meet consumers, where, again, we always believe that there's more value to having a direct relationship with a consumer, but can you go meet consumers in channels where they're already shopping, where there's high intent, and can you convert them into direct consumers long term? And so with rising digital costs and CACs, it starts to help make wholesale look more appealing in terms of going and finding consumers.
Yeah. You mentioned the LTV side, and it's one of those things that I'm always kind of shocked when I speak to people about, the business they're running, mostly obviously e-commerce sellers, of like, it never seems to be as much of a focus as I believe that it should be. Obviously, it sounds like you guys are doing that, and I don't want to get into specifics on financials or anything, but how are you measuring basically what your customer acquisition cost is versus what your LTV is? Because LTV can be a bit of a loaded question if you're factoring in 12, 13 years of business. You really only want to limit that LTV to like a couple years or so. So how are you measuring that?
Yeah, so we look at LTV to CAC, and we look at it over shorter periods of time. So 2 to 3 years kind of max. I didn't mention this at the front, but our business actually started mostly as a wholesale business. And so we have kind of pivoted since then. And so I would say our e-commerce business is really only 5 or 6 years old. And so we look at more recent cohorts because, again, I think you don't want to count on having customers be with you for 4, 5, 6 years. It's hard to know what things are going to look like down the road. And also, I think, the most recent cohorts are probably the best at predicting what's going to happen in the near-term future. So we look very closely at LTV to CAC to make sure we're driving meaningful profitability. We focus on first purchase profitability too, though, because then it makes everything else gravy. And so trying to get to a first purchase profitable dynamic where you feel like you can kind of invest up until a point, and we know exactly what our ROAS needs to be for a first purchase to be profitable. And so let's grow up until we get to that point, but not go beyond that. And then the retention piece becomes, just icing on the cake.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned that, you've kind of focused on those main marketing channels that are obviously the ones that you have stronger attribution on, that you have a little bit more control over to pull those levers. What are those channels that you're mainly focused on now?
So for new customers, we still spend a lot of our money within the Meta platform. So Facebook and Instagram, and then Google is our third. We also do a lot of affiliate, because affiliate is just pay for performance, which is great if you're going to give some type of content producer 10, 12% to help you sell your products. That's much cheaper than paying Facebook $50 or $60 to acquire a customer for you. So those are the channels that we focus on. And then again, kind of circling back to the retention piece in LTV, we'll do 65% of our revenue this year from existing customers. And so, that I think is, we don't talk about that from a channel standpoint as much, but SMS and email are critical for us.
That makes sense. Drew, really appreciate having you on the show. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Obviously, really appreciate it. I'd love to give you an opportunity here to let everyone know a little bit more about where they can find more about you and more about Pact.
Awesome. Yeah. So find more about Pact at wearpact.com. I will be biased in saying we make amazing clothes, and you can also feel good about what you're purchasing from an environmental and a social standpoint. So check us out there. And then I'm on LinkedIn, Drew Cook. And yeah, Andrew, I really appreciate the time and the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show, Drew. Everyone else who tuned in, obviously, thank you as well. Please do the usual: rate, review, subscribe, all that fun stuff on whichever channel you want, or head over to ecommshow.com to check out all of our other episodes. But as usual, we appreciate y'all joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Have a good one.
Thank you for tuning in to the E-Comm Show. Head over to ecommshow.com to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or on the BlueTuskr YouTube channel. The E-Comm Show is brought to you by BlueTuskr, a full-service digital marketing company specifically for e-commerce sellers looking to accelerate their growth. Go to BlueTuskr.com now for more information. Make sure to tune in next week for another amazing episode of the E-Comm Show.